My friends, Lula's isolation is no longer just a theory cooked up in government offices. It's a ballistic reality that has just crossed the Colombian border. Forget immediately what the bot polling institutes, armchair analysts, and the made-up headlines of the traditional press tried to tell you over the past few weeks. While the Itamaraty was spending your tax money to draw an artificial map where the Latin American left pretended to be sovereign, stable, and untouchable, the streets of Bogota delivered a violent reality check to the Planalto's power project. The right-wing candidate Esprella, a leader who openly draws inspiration from Nayib Kelly's relentless fight against crime and Javier Milei's surgical spending cuts, not only survived the coordinated massacre by the establishment, he swallowed and ran over the official narrative of Gustavo Peixoto, coming in first in the first round by securing 43% of the valid votes against 41% for the government candidate Cepeda. He brutally contradicted the inflated predictions of the Atlas, Intel, Envarmer, and CNC agencies, who tried until the last second to shape voter behavior through forged numbers to hide the conservative vanguard. The reality of the polls, my friends, with 99.92% of the count completed, this dismantled the ideological bluff and pushed the international market toward an almost irrevocable probability of a right-wing victory in the final vote on June 21. I know that's when the second round of elections happens in Colombia. Did you get the message? The left Lula lost in the first round. The aged relic who occupies the presidency in Brasilia knows perfectly well the extent of the damage. Because if Colombia falls, the last pillar supporting his project turns to dust, leaving the Brazilian government in a state of absolute solitude, unprecedented in modern history. No one is talking about this with the proper seriousness on television. But the secret meeting between Cepeda and the Brazilian leadership weeks before the election reveals that the Planalto tried to act directly as a guarantor of an external mechanism, repeating the hypocrisy of staying silent in the face of leftist interference while crying persecution when the opposition seeks legitimate support in the Washington committees. In other words, Lula can support an ally in a foreign country's election, but Flavio Bolsonaro can't seek support over there in the United States. Double standards, that's how the left operates. Now look at the level of structural failure that's hidden behind this vote count, because we're working and witnessing the mechanical breakdown of what our method defines as the aged relic. Gustavo Petro and the leadership in Brasilia operate like completely obsolete political models from the 1980s, trying to run their archaic concepts of state control within the social and technological processor of the year 2026. And the practical result of this is an inevitable breakdown. In a desperate attempt to buy the loyalty of his base electorate and to camouflage the chronic rejection that corrodes his mandate, Petro tried to cheat the most basic math by injecting an artificial 23% increase in the minimum wage in December, accumulating an absurd 75% rise over 4 years of socialist administration. And for you to understand what the disaster of public finances is without the jargon of badge-wearing economists, just think about your household pantry. If you spend much more than you earn and blow your monthly money buying treats for your neighbors to pretend you're popular, your pantry will end up empty, your debts will pile up, and your family will go broke. That's exactly what Petro did. But the physics of economics doesn't accept demagogic decrees or partisan speeches, and the price of this fiscal irresponsibility was charged in milliseconds by the laws of the market. Inflation skyrocketed at the end of the line, jumping from 4.6 to 6.4 and turning the worker's life into a hell of price instability. Because increasing wages by decree, without real growth in industrial production and without guaranteeing legal security, is exactly like injecting a massive dose of adrenaline into a body that's suffering from severe hemorrhaging. The heart even beats faster per minute, creating a false sense of life. But the final collapse is inevitable, and the body ends up even weaker. The average citizen realizes that the extra money in their paycheck evaporated before it even reached the supermarket shelves, generating a wave of legitimate protests that polls try to hide but which materialized in the collapse of the left's vote in the real world. serving as a warning of the same disaster.
Desenhado em Brasília.
After all, the same mindset, the same outcome. Where the government spends as if there's no tomorrow and pushes the country toward the same inflationary abyss that the conservative opposition promises to fight by cutting state privileges and attracting private capital. My friends, Colombia is not just another country on the map. Historically, it operates as the logistical lifeline that sustains, protects, and funds the campaign. Entire election campaigns in Latin America through hidden money from organized crime networks under the administration of Gustavo Petro, who has a personal history of involvement with guerrilla factions. In the past, the country turned its security policy into an alleged peace plan with armed militias. And in practice, this meant abandoning entire territories to the control of cartels that manage international drug trafficking. Do you think it's just a coincidence that the Primero Comando da Capital and the Comando Vermelho control the logistical routes and port exits? Exactly in the geographic areas where Cepeda's left had the highest votes on the Colombian electoral map. My friends, there is no such thing as coincidence at this level of analysis. What exists is an obvious symbiosis where crime money fuels the political machinery to protect open borders and finance survival. It's an obvious symbiosis that fuels the machinery to guarantee protection, open borders, and survival. That's what symbiosis and survival are. What exists is an obvious symbiosis where crime money fuels the political machinery. What is an obvious symbiosis where crime fuels it? Imagine that Gustavo Petro's government security, Gustavo, the looting of minerals, gold, silver, everything. It's this obvious symbiosis where money fuels it. The symbiosis, the machinery. What is being sold by organized crime on the black market? It's this money that finances the operations of PCC, Comando Vermelho, the cartels, and funds the buying of votes in all these little republics of Latin America, including Brazil. How do you think PT wins an election, then loses another, and then comes back? It's exactly like that, my friends, with that money. That's why the victory of the right represents a tsunami of change that destroys this financial oxygen and cuts off the illicit flow that used to feed the São Paulo Forum. The candidate who finished third in the election, Paloma Valencia, who represents the traditional center-right, has already declared her full support for the star, consolidating the wall of national unity, which will suffocate the clandestine ports of drug trafficking and isolate organized crime. With the closure of this logistical hub, the domino effect that has already swept through Argentina, Bolivia with the rise of Rodrigo Paez, and Chile with the victory of José Cash is now moving northward. And it hits directly at the gates of Brasilia. The outcry from newspapers aligned with the system, claiming that the right in Colombia would eliminate the last partner of the Brazilian government, reveals the panic of the bureaucrats. Brazil is officially becoming a completely isolated ideological island. A political desert surrounded by neighboring nations that have chosen law, order, and the free market, leaving the Palacio do Planalto locked in diplomatic solitude, suffocating before its own fall at the polls. This year, in the elections, Maduro was supposed to send the money, and now Maduro is in prison. His right-hand man, the operator, was also extradited to the United States. Who is going to bring the money for the 2026 elections? My friends, they are cornered. When they realized that the fake favoritism had evaporated and that the fraud of the polls was exposed by the real vote, despair took over the government palaces. Gustavo Petro, Lula's friend, came out publicly to break with institutional norms and openly declare that he does not accept the official results of that night's vote. He violently attacked the private company in charge of the vote counting and claimed that the vote counting software algorithms had been secretly manipulated. This is exactly the kind of behavior that lurks in the minds of totalitarian relics. When the people's software doesn't match the tyrannical leader's wishes, the leader tries to break the computer and paralyze the institutions, going so far as to invent the disappearance of 800,000 ballots in an attempt to sabotage the election and prevent the democratic transition. And this movement, pay attention, is a clear rehearsal for the preparation of a coup d'etat, and it serves as the most disturbing warning for the Brazilian scenario. The leadership in Brasilia knows that its popularity is melting away in the face of international isolation and economic ruin. And when they see the mathematical reality of the conservative opposition growing irreversibly at the polls, who knows, Who knows what they might be capable of doing to sabotage the process and not hand over power. The next move in this story won't be diplomatic, it will be pure survival. Because Lula's isolation is no longer a theory, it's a ballistic reality that has just crossed the Colombian border. My friends, the reality of the Latin American polls has drawn a scenario of irreversible rupture, dividing our perspective into a strictly binary position. On one side, the advance of the right and the suffocation of the logistical lung of crime. Proof that the tsunami of change has already begun, signaling the definitive shattering of a continental power project which collapsed due to the destruction of its own economy. On the other hand, the system's attempt to defraud expectations with technological excuses demonstrates a complete illusion of control before the final fall. And this is where we separate real analysts from armchair guessers who watch regular television. If you understood that the shrapnel from this Colombian turnaround will hit the heart of Brasilia with full force, write the word shrapnel in the comments. But if you still think that the state propaganda machine can patch up this broken piece and fool the population until the end, write illusion in the comments. I will personally analyze each response to identify who is tuned into real geopolitical intelligence, serving as a bridge to our final security alert. Everything I've shown you here represents only the surface of a much deeper crisis. In our intelligence bunker, more than 3,000 elite analysts are already cross-referencing real-time data from border sensors and the flow of capital leaving Bogota at this very moment, fearing the banks will be shut down by the regime. They are the ones who independently finance this search for the truth that the mainstream media tries to censor to protect the system's allies. Now, with the QR code appearing on your screen, secure your strategic access to this restricted environment by clicking the link in the description and in the first comment. Pinned before the doors close, join the community. And if your main goal is to protect the moral integrity of your home and shield your family against social engineering, check out our exclusive channel for series and movies. A strict independent curation of the highest cinematic quality, 100% free of woke culture and with no ideological indoctrination, straight to the point. Well, if you're tired of spending an hour scrolling through streaming services trying to decide what to watch, I did that for you. Our team put together a selection, like I said, with excellent recommendations so you can just enjoy without wasting time choosing what's good and separating it from the junk, none of that whining. So, come to our series and movies channel where we're recommending amazing shows that talk about the conflicts in the Middle East and also about what's happening here in our hemisphere, okay? Now subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, leave a like on the video and share it. Yes, my friends, so shield your mind. I'm Shimon Oliveira and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.